In a country ravaged by war, a massive change is about to take place for more than 3,500 children being used as soldiers. These boys are in the Sudan People's Liberation Army, and they've never known peace. Children growing up here see soldiers as saviours, see guns as a meal ticket. There are few positive images for those growing up amidst the destruction of this long-running civil war. Not all are frontline soldiers. The youngest are often used for menial tasks, but all have been trained to kill. A guerrilla army fighting a bush war is vulnerable to ambush, so even 8-year-olds may have to pick up a gun and fight. Children here have been fashioned in a brutal cauldron. Even in the best of times, living conditions in southern Sudan are harsh. Those under 5 are at particular risk from sudden death and crippling disease. Young boys are sent off to cattle camps to toughen up. Here they learn about tribal tradition and how to survive. If rains have come and the fighting is far away, it can be a time of plenty. But war has often brought famine. In 1998, up to 100,000 people died in a famine that brought unbelievable misery to the impoverished confrontation zone of Bahr Ghazal. Repeated raids by militias destroyed crops. Many children saw their parents die of starvation. To survive, they sought out rebel army camps because they knew food would be there. But an army is never a fit place for a child. One that is actually fighting puts vulnerable children in even more danger. Sudan's misery seldom makes headlines. The war flows across a vast landscape, claiming victims of all ages. Around 2 million lives have been lost. Large numbers of children have always been in the SPLA. They witness things no child should see. My father, mother and brothers were all killed by the enemy, says 16-year-old Malong. I had no choice but to take a gun and get revenge. Peter Marween is another child who's been robbed of his parents. He enjoys a high reputation amongst the other boys, who can parade like spitting polished soldiers. This is the day they're going to be marched out of the SPLA. They're being demobilized as part of the largest demobilization of children ever attempted in the midst of a conflict. The special ceremony and the laying down of arms is important. It gives a clear signal to the children that the army can no longer be their home or their sanctuary. The assault rifles and the uniforms are removed. The children are now civilians, and the UN's Children's Fund UNICEF steps in. Immediately, each child is given a package containing clothing, mosquito nets and cooking equipment. For boys like Peter, the contents of the sack represent more personal possessions than they've ever had in their lives. The delight masks feelings of uncertainty about leaving the security of the SPLA and doubts about the future. For the moment, all this can be forgotten. Peter, for one, didn't actually want to leave the army. To his way of thinking, there's still unfinished business. The northern militia raided our village, he says. My mother was abducted and all our cattle stolen. I joined the SPLA for protection. Field commanders received their orders. Demobilization started to happen all over the Bahr Ghazal region. Child soldiers attract considerable international attention and concern. Those in the SPLA are under discipline and haven't been associated with the type of atrocities that have made child soldiers notorious in other parts of the continent. But it has been a clear and enduring human rights abuse that people like Commander Najat knew had to be stopped.
As a matter of principle, the SPLA is fully committed to the process of demobilization, and this stems from our commitment to human rights and international humanitarian law that bans the recruitment of children under the age of 18. We have affixed our signature to a number of protocols. We have signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We have also signed other option protocols that prohibits the recruitment of children under the age of 18, and we are fully committed to them, and we shall adhere by these commitments.
This conference is about lost childhood and lost innocence.
6 months before the mass demobilization, UNICEF organized a conference to bridge a gap between stated policies and reality. The rebel movement had its own demobilization program, but it dealt with only about 200 children a year. The conference underlined that giving children an education was essential if the recruitment cycle was to be broken.
Hello.
Shortly afterwards, UNICEF's executive director, Carol Bellamy, visited southern Sudan and pressed the case for all children to be removed from the army.
We urge that all around the world.
The Chief of Staff, Salva Kiir, gave her a written assurance. You will get thousands of them, he said.
Okay. I will assume your word is good.
Within a very short period of time, you may get thousands of them.
The child soldiers in the remote foxholes of Bahr Ghazal were a priority. They had already faced too many fighting seasons. As the communities prepared for expected attacks and raids, the decision was taken that these militarized children should be moved as soon as possible. Aircraft from the UN's World Food Programme were diverted from usual humanitarian tasks. Some of the children had walked for miles and had left notorious hotspots. For all, the promise of education was a potent enticement to make the change. most of these boys, a ride in a car would be a very rare event. It is a certainty that very few, if any, had ever travelled by air. It must have been very scary indeed, but air transport is the quickest and safest way of travelling in southern Sudan. More than 2,500 were lifted by air to the Rumbek area, an hour's flight time away. Others came by foot and road. On arrival, they were given a medical check and some food before being moved off to transit camps. Taking young children away from the possibility of contact with family members is not usual. UNICEF believes the children would have been at risk had they been left behind. Siddharth Chatterjee was in charge of the Rumbek operation.
There is an urgency that is warranted telescoping the time frame of evacuating these children because of all the indications of the conflict breaking out because of the dry season. And having had the SPLA giving a commitment to Carol Bellamy that they will demobilize children, we wanted to stand by to make sure that these children were out of harm's way.
Before the airlift, work had begun on camps where the children were to live until they could be returned to their homes. 5 were initially prepared, but this grew to 8 as the number of children grew. The camps were operated by Sudanese and international aid agencies who had joined the project. UNICEF put in water drilling teams to ensure that each camp had boreholes and sufficient latrines. It was work completed against a hard deadline. A basic minimum of food, water and shelter had to be in place by the time the boys arrived. And arrive they did, 3,551 of them. Peter, the boy who wanted to stay as a soldier and who had never been to school, was beginning to imagine new and exciting challenges.
I'm
not sure about my education yet, he says, but if I get a proper education, then I could be a doctor or a priest.
Okay, now we finish from this, the first fraction. Let us go to the second fraction. We can solve
Managing the boys' thirst for education was a constant challenge. They wanted desperately to make up for lost time. The camps offered emergency education. In the army, there was seldom anything like this.
That's for drawing, huh? Okay. So I want you to draw something good that you enjoy, that you like, which is more of peace, not the picture of tank, not the picture of Antinov, but a very good thing that brings peace to you. So you draw and bring me tomorrow, okay?
The boys were taught about new varieties of fast-growing vegetables that supplemented the rations or were sold in local markets. In special clinics, health workers treated chronic conditions and dealt with more than 400 consultations a week. Over the 6 months of the transit phase, they noticed a marked improvement in the general health of the boys. They remarked that routine injuries healed faster. Probably for the first time in their young lives, there were formal games. This is important to build a sense of comradeship and was intended to provide fun, an important ingredient for shocked children who have been too close to suffering and death. Many of the boys were taught how to pass on safety messages about landmines. They had the right background to appreciate the dangers of these horrific weapons and could carry the warning back to villages. Very soon after arrival, more information was found out about the children and what they could remember about their families. This was essential if boys like Peter were going to be returned to a home environment. Tracing teams used the information in the field, and after 5 months, enough was known and in place to start the process of return. It was nearly time to say goodbye.
Goodbye, brothers. Goodbye, sisters. Shall we meet again? Goodbye, brothers. Goodbye, sisters. Shall we meet again? Goodbye, brothers. Goodbye, sisters. Shall we meet again?
Families were told to gather at airstrips to await arrival. If there was no living relative, boys were to be looked after by caregivers in their villages. The local tribe doesn't have a word for orphan. As soon as the seasonal rains lifted sufficiently to allow regular flights, the order was given to go. The rains meant that the so-called fighting season in Bara Ghazal was over for the next few months, giving the return operation some security. Nonetheless, the boys were being returned to a place of danger. There they would have to share the same hazards as all the other children. At least now there is a chance they would not be expected to fight, and home is best. The reaction suggests that something of childhood remained in boys who had been asked to act a tough role in a man's world. There were tears too. Look at the size of this boy. Tears are surely his right. The father says he's been in the army for 2 years.
It was isolated from me because our wealth and all the things have been collected by the Arabs, and we remain very poor. That is why our children have been be soldiers.
Garang Deng is 18. His mother hadn't seen him since he went into the army 4 years ago. I want to get an education, he says. I don't want to go back to the army. It's time for Peter Marween to pack up his possessions. He's a boy who's discovered new ambitions. He's now going and will be travelling to his uncle's home several hours away by road.
Line up, please, line up. Be quick.
Peter was typical in many ways, popular and obviously clever. He used to do guard duty at army camps while other soldiers went out on patrol. It's going to be a hard journey home. In southern Sudan, development has stopped. Conditions have deteriorated from a very low level. Getting aid into this territory is difficult. It's very difficult too for a young boy who wants to make his way to school and his way in the world. For a brief moment, the hardship and uncertainties of daily life are forgotten. Peter has a home. There are people to care for him and for him to care about.
Inar, agadi, kiva, yeah, agadi ka
There are rituals to be observed. The family is accepting someone new, and he has to be protected from any watching evil spirits.
Ina mare to kare te mai ram ay nok ten ba ma win ti wai kai malwan na win ko
And the spirits themselves have to be driven away.
Krai whoop krai pool ya lwela cha lwela la ya yin krai ku jala mi kin chap ku yin krai jong rai pool gal
I can only have a future, says this potential doctor, if I can hold the pen. Only when the evil spirits have been dealt with can the forms be signed. It's official. Peter has a family. The rains brought floods and engorged rivers, which had to be crossed. That meant boats, another complication for a difficult operation. But everywhere it seemed the word had spread, and people were waiting to welcome home their sons. Santino Salva has a long walk from the airstrip to his home village. The countryside here is the front line. Raids forced Santino Salva to flee, and he became a combat soldier. Now 15, he's not been back here for 8 years. I want him to stay here and help me, says his mother. I'm too old. Thousands of homecomings with years of abuse behind each one. UNICEF is now attempting to make communities more resilient and better able to cope with the needs of all their children. Extra water holes are being drilled in home areas. The agency has also ordered tents to act as emergency classrooms and is working with other international aid groups to train teachers. It's hoped that the return of the child soldiers will mark an improvement for all children, girls as well as boys.
When you go to the class of the children, you must have.
This is the start of a very long process.
Clap for him.
72 former child soldiers who were given emergency teacher training are now working.
How do we know God?
Mima Perisic is UNICEF's education officer in southern Sudan.
Who will attempt to do it?
UNICEF is supporting the schools which have enrolled child soldiers by providing materials, providing textbooks and training teachers. Everybody has realized through talking to these child soldiers, they have actually conveyed this message about the importance of education, I think, to all the rest. Education for them and for all the children. And they hope that that will refocus attention of everybody to education.
There have been very few hopeful events in the sorry history of southern Sudan. It's hoped that the return of the 3,551 children will be a watershed. The SPLA is continuing to demobilize children. The challenge is immense, but a way has been pointed that could lead to an early end to a massive abuse of children in a horrific war.